Once again, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to part 3 of Let's Talk About Energy. And we are going to be talking about energy in our town tonight. So I am going to turn the program over to Nancy Harmon Jenkins now. She is here as representative of the Camden Energy Committee. Nancy, take it away. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Julia. And I'll say welcome to you all too. I'm so happy to see such an enthusiastic turnout. You know, it just confirms my belief that we here in the Mid-Coast have an energetic group of people who are really committed to combating climate change and eager to figure out what we as a community and as individuals can do about it. I saw a report, I can't remember if it was yesterday or this morning, my days are all confused, but a recent report from Yale University, from their Center for Studying Climate Change, that stated that 40% of all Americans are confused and hopeless about the whole issue of climate change. But we here in the mid-coast of Maine, we're determined to confront the crisis and to do something about it. I want to read a quote from my friend Sarah Miller, who's also on the Energy Committee, in an article that she wrote recently for Penn Bay Pilot. She said, "Climate change is the biggest crisis facing the world today, and Camden has the financial and ethical wherewithal to be in the forefront." And I agree with that completely. I think it's so true. We started these conversations back in March, looking at how we could focus on energy in our own homes, everything from window cozies to solar panels on our roofs to whatever. And then in April, we looked at our businesses and how they could respond to the needs of climate change. And now it's time, as Julia said, to look at our town as a whole and the institutions that rely on our tax dollars for funding. And to bring us up to date, I've asked the natural person to respond to this. First of all, Camden's very capable town manager, Audra Caler, to fill us in on Camden's efforts. I know I used to be quite unaware of how much energy a town consumes just by its very existence. But Audra, who's ultimately in charge of all of that, is very much aware of the costs and the savings. After Audra, we'll have Keith Rose, who was recently retired from his role as Director of Facilities for the whole 5-town school district. And he'll tell us about how the schools, which is another major energy consumer, how the schools have managed to keep all that under control to benefit both the taxpayers and also our children. And then it will be the turn of Beattie Parker, who's sometimes called Camden's tree lady, to talk about the overwhelming importance of trees in our local landscape, both for beauty and for keeping us cool, but also as climate change mitigators. And finally, we'll hear from Davis Saltonstall, who may be familiar to many of you from the composting efforts that he and his partner Tessa Rosenberry have put together. But Davis is here tonight in his role as sustainability coordinator for the city of Rockland. I especially wanted to hear from him because of my overwhelming conviction, as I keep saying, that we are all in this together. There's no more marking of town and county boundaries when it comes to the climate threat we're facing. It's time to put down some of those old rivalries, which go back in many cases to long before I was a kid here. Time to put those aside and work together for a better future. And Davis, I think, can help us see that way forward. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Audra to tell us what's happening in Camden.
Well, thank you very much, Nancy. And in your introduction about the town of Camden, you mentioned about the Camden as a organization being a large consumer of energy. And that's more true for the town of Camden than really any other municipality on the Mid-Coast. And I'd say that for a municipality our size, our energy consumption is incredibly notable. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we own and operate the Camden Snow Bowl, and the whole proposition of owning and operating a ski resort. It's a facility that's incredibly energy consumptive when you look at snowmaking and running lifts and lighting slopes and all the different components that go into owning and operating that facility. And it really doubles sort of our energy consumption as a municipality, particularly when you're looking at others that are the same size as us. So to get into some of the initiatives that the town has been working on to sort of recognize the reality that we are a major consumer of energy. I thought I would sort of go through, the projects that I've been involved with in my time at Camden. And I really want to make the point that this is a team effort. Everything we do as a municipality. We work closely with the Energy Committee. I try very hard to have all my department heads integrate sustainability and energy efficiency in everything that they do. So all these projects that I go through, it's really important to recognize that there are a lot of people involved in all of these. So this is sort of if you're just looking at energy efficiency initiatives and things that we've done to try to reduce our carbon footprint from a consumption standpoint, one of the first things and the biggest things that I started working on was the LED streetlight conversion. And this was prompted by the Energy Committee, who'd reached out to a couple of companies who consult and project manage the process of first acquiring streetlights from the utilities and then converting them over from the sodium bulbs to LEDs. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail, but to Nancy's point about trying to break down town barriers, that project was something that had been discussed when I was the interim city manager for Rockland. So I reached out to my colleague, Tom Luttrell, who's the current city manager of Rockland, and we started talking about doing this together. And then it just seemed natural to start trying to include our colleagues in other towns across the mid-coast. So, by the time we got to a point where we were, going out to try to find a project manager to work with, we had 6 towns that were involved in this effort, and we all worked through real-term energy. We worked together to choose fixtures and other, details associated with that project. So that was a really great partnership between Camden and 6 other of our neighboring municipalities in the mid-coast. Another, major effort was the performance contract to make energy efficiency improvements to all the town buildings that we're working with Siemens on. And that includes, a number of different upgrades at the Opera House, the Public Safety Building, the Public Works Building, Snow Bowl, and there's some work going on at the wastewater treatment plant as well. And that included upgrading heating systems, insulation, building envelope improvements, as well as replacing all the lighting to LEDs there. And there are a lot of, small improvements that we're trying to make in an ongoing basis to our buildings. Things like, window inserts at the Opera House, creating a vestibule entryway to the French conference room. Just small things that if you add them up, they make a big difference. And there are some other things that are, less noticeable, but still really important when you're looking at trying to reduce energy consumption across the town. And I couldn't go into all of them because there's a lot of them going on, but an effort on, the idea of complete streets and trying to advocate for that. So that's the idea of making improvements to our streets that allow them to be more accessible to pedestrians and cyclists. Because if you're looking, and this isn't really the town as an organization proper, it's more across the entire town, trying to make it easier for people to choose to walk and use their bicycles instead of driving everywhere. And we've got, the great bones within our community for that. We are a, sort of a dense downtown community. So there's a lot of things that we could do to make the most of it and try to encourage that. We're also in the process of looking at not just hybrid vehicles now, but more electric vehicles to replace our current fleet. And that's, we've got, police cruisers that are hybrids. We started with the administrative vehicle. We've got, a hybrid cruiser that's out on the road. So that's something that's going to take a number of years because we try to replace them, one vehicle at a time every year. And also we're making major upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant that are with processing equipment that's going to lead to energy efficiency. So in terms of green energy and things that we're trying to do to make sure that the energy that we're sourcing is from renewable sources, one thing that we currently have in place are we've 100% green energy RECs purchased through Constellation New Energy to offset our electricity usage. And this is less the Sagamore Farm solar array. So it's 122.9 kilowatt per hour solar array that's in place at the Sagamore Farm site, which is on town parcel owned by the town. And this offsets about 7.5 of the town's current energy use. And another initiative that we are planning to be involved in is a net energy billing arrangement with the Knox County Airport, who's going to be installing a 5 megawatt solar array. And that's being funded by CARES Act funding that was received by the airport. And I think what's been really important to the town is not only offsetting the use of our energy with renewable energy, but also how do we invest in renewable energy locally? So we've looked at a number of different propositions around, power purchase agreements and net energy billing arrangements at different facilities that are going up all over the state with the legislative change in 2019 and the rulemaking in 2020 around solar. It's really opened up the market across the state of Maine. And there are a lot of options for buying into, different facilities, but it was really important to the town of Camden that we were investing locally in solar. And this is a really great opportunity to partner with the county on this effort. So to kind of look a little bit more closely at one of the first projects I spoke about, which was the LED streetlight conversion. As a result of that project, because we have acquired all of our street lights from CMP and converted them all to LEDs, our average savings in kilowatt hours was 74,277, and that was a 66% reduction over what we were consuming before in electricity for our street lights. So just to give you some context of what that means, that's about 52.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And that can be measured in all of these factors here. So 870 tree seedlings grown over 10 years, taking 11.4 passenger vehicles off the road for a year, the equivalent of 6.3 homes energy use for a year, and 122 barrels of oil. In addition to all of that, carbon that we're taking, all that sort of carbon that we're reducing our footprint by, we're also saving money as well. So we're saving $36,500 in annual operating costs. And that's a little bit complicated. It's not just energy costs. I want to be very clear about that. That's a combination of energy costs as well as tariffs that we used to pay to Central Maine Power to lease streetlights. So the performance contract for all town facilities. So if you look at what that's going to achieve, and we are in the process of doing that. So currently all of the lights in all town buildings have been converted over to LEDs. They're drilling the geothermal wells at the Snow Bowl, and that will be the heating source for the Snow Bowl. And they're also going around and doing a number of upgrades to building envelopes over the summer. So you're going to see a lot of work going on still at the Opera House, as well as all of our other buildings. And that project will wrap up by the end of the summer. And as a result, it'll reduce the town's carbon footprint by 128 metric tons. And these are all the, these are all sort of the, how you can look at what that's offsetting or what that equates to. And in terms of energy and operational savings, we're looking about $47,000 annually. And it's really important for me to mention here that annual savings on projects like the performance contract and the LED streetlights, that's a really important piece of funding and financing these projects so that, there is a benefit to the town, and we're not 100% footing the cost of these conversions with taxpayer funds. We're also funding them with these savings. Not completely, but well, with the streetlights, it's complete, but with the performance contract, there's still a taxpayer contribution as well. And for the solar, so this is what the conceptual plan is for the parcel where the solar array will go at the Knox County Regional Airport. And if you look at what all of our operations consume, it's 2,100 megawatt hours of electricity per year, and that's quite significant for our town our size. And like I said, a lot of that comes from owning and operating the Snowball. And if you look at what the Sagamore Farm array provides, it's about 159 megawatt hours per year. So we still need about an additional 1.5 megawatts to offset our electrical use. And the Knox County Regional Airport would be a 5 megawatt facility. So the town of Camden would be the single largest user through a net energy billing agreement with the county. And that's, I think, something really exciting because, like I said, we're able to, as a town, invest in renewable energy locally. We're able to partner with the county. And I think it's just a win-win initiative for everybody who's going to be involved with it. So,
Audra, we have about 2 more minutes.
Okay, I think this is my last slide. So if you look at how much greenhouse gas will the town's solar investment offset. So if you look at Sagamore Farm, it's 113 metric tons of carbon, and those are all the benefits of it. If you look at what we're going to be purchasing through the Knox County Solar Array, through the net energy billing agreement, it's 1,500 metric tons of carbon. And as you can see, that's incredibly significant. So I'll stop my presentation. So those are, the most immediate projects that we've been working on in terms of reducing carbon footprint through both consumption and finding, alternatives, renewable energy alternatives, and trying to do it locally.
Thank you so much, Audra. I had no idea how comprehensive you had approached the issue, how comprehensively you'd approached the issue. And I know that, our local community really appreciates the push to invest in renewable energy locally. So thank you. Next, we're going to be hearing from Keith Rose, who's the former Director of Facilities for 5 Town Schools. So Keith, you can unmute yourself now, and it's your turn to speak.
Thanks, Nancy. So most of the, I'm going to share my screen here, and most of the data that I have is going to be for the Camden Hills Regional High School, because that's where we have the longest history, and the 2 other schools are a little bit newer. So when we opened the high school in the year 2000, we thought it was just the most efficient building and systems that we could possibly have. In reality, it was terribly inefficient, and we were using well over 2 million kilowatt hours a year just for the high school. So 2 or 3 years into it, we started looking at why and started looking at options. So in around 2004, 2005, this is a 4 or 5 year old building. We did a major lightings and control retrofit. And that was a cost to the taxpayer of about $415,000, but it basically broke even in its lifetime. In 2005, we had been spending, I showed the kilowatt hour usage. Some of the historical oil usage and other energy usage has been lost, but the oil usage for the building was very similar to the electrical usage. It was quite high. And we boiled that down to the fact that because of the size of the boiler plant, we really couldn't allow the building to reduce temperature at night and have enough capacity to bring it back up quickly in the morning. So we actually spent some money on some increasing boiler size, and that actually was paid for through some construction mediation. We also replaced 5-year-old ground source heat pumps, which had a design flaw, and so that also the heat pumps were saving us quite a lot of money. Totally, it cut our fuel consumption by about 40%. In 2010, we put up our first 8,000 watt solar array that had a total cost of $60,000. We wrote a grant request to Efficiency Maine. We got $50,000 grant. So the cost of the taxpayer on that project is about $10,000, which is a simple return of a little over 6 years. 15% return on investment. I think anybody would say that's probably a good investment. And that system, since we put the system you're looking at on the screen on, that original 8,000 watt system has been moved to the maintenance building. So it's still saving taxpayers money. In 2012 was the culmination of a 8-year-long student-driven project. They raised a little over $500,000 to erect a 100 kW wind turbine on campus. No taxpayer funds in this project initially. Since it's been up, there was a major issue 3 years ago. The manufacturer did cover the part, but there was considerable cost in renting a crane to get the turbine back up and running. And these kilowatt hours and the numbers you're seeing are about 1.5 years old. So savings to date are greater than that. Annually, the turbine, because it was decided to put it on site, not in a better wind location, the savings are $9,000 to $10,000 a year. It still is cash positive. In 2015, and this is 10 years after a major lighting retrofit we did in 2005. In 2015, we did another major lighting retrofit, and we converted all the indoor lighting to LED. The total cost on that project was a little over $100,000. We did receive a $45,000 Efficiency Maine rebate. So taxpayers spent $69,000 on that project, which had a simple payback of just under 4 years. Return on investment, again, that's a little over 26%. And again, the savings are about 1.5 years old. It's a savings of about $23,000 a year at this point. In 2015, we also entered a power purchase agreement for the solar that you see on the 3 roofs on the slide. The total cost was a little over $450,000. Like I said, we signed a 20-year power purchase agreement, so the taxpayers have $0 in it. Currently, the district is paying, it's actually about 11.2 cents a kilowatt hour now. However, this is the year, this upcoming year, in the June budget, you will be asked to approve expending $170,000 to purchase the system. the annual savings after the purchase will be a little over $31,000, and that purchase will have a payback of just over 5 years. Other things that we've done, in we worked for 3 years with the Island Institute Energy for Me program. I believe the library was included in that, involved with that program too, as one of the commercial buildings. This is where we installed some monitoring equipment in all these buildings. It was energy awareness was built into the curriculum. There were contests between the schools that were involved, and the students were really involved. And when you look at the energy use numbers, our energy went down each year of the 3 years. In 2015, we participated in a DOE pilot program. It's something that they did just by looking at the interval data, and they provided us with a pretty accurate report. In 2015, again, we were looking for ways to not only save costs but reduce our footprint. And we were actually started off looking at possibly a wood chip or a pellet boiler conversion, but because of the costs of fuels where they were at, it just made more sense to do a fairly inexpensive propane conversion at that time. Between 2016 and 18, we started seeing our energy use, our electric use, start to creep back up. So we did some sleuthing and trying to figure out what was going on. We found some major control issues. We kind of did some in-house recommissioning. We found terribly underutilized step-down transformers. A step-down transformer is what takes the electricity that comes into the building as 3-phase high voltage down to something you can plug your laptop into. When the high school was originally designed, it was built during 98 and 99 and opened in 2000. So the design started back around 96, 97. And back then, what was a computer? A computer was a huge CRT screen and a big box that just sucked up a lot of electricity. And so we realized that all these step-down transformers that spotted all throughout the building, they were sized for 1999, 98, 99 technology, and we just don't have that use. So we actually found that we took some of those offline and shifted the load to some of the other transformers. So if you know anything about a transformer sits there, whether there's any load on it or not, it creates heat, it uses energy. So we were able to stop creating all this heat from 5 out of 26 step-down transformers. So we reduced just the standby loss by about 20%. Couple of years later, in 2018, where we had found some major control issues, we worked with our existing PM vendor and controls vendor, and they actually financed the DDC upgrade for us over 5 years and rolled it into the PM contract cost. And we, at that time, during the course of the DDC, we did a controls recommissioning. I was going to take that slide out. But in 2018, we did start on composting all food waste from the high school on site, and I decided not to take it out because it does have to do with energy, because we are no longer transporting this the composting materials off site. We were able to reduce our trash pickups by, I think it was two pickups a week. So
We have about 2 more minutes, Keith.
okay, I think I'm getting there. So if you can see our energy use since the after the first slide, which was reduced by about almost half from the first year, and has pretty much gone down over time. The elementary school was the new construction was in 2010. The entire addition went with geothermal. We converted the original building after that to geothermal, and the LED lighting retrofit is ongoing. The new Camden Rockport Middle School is primarily sewer thermal, and you might ask what sewer thermal is. Rather than drilling wells, we simply stuck a pump in the final effluent manhole, and we're reducing the temperature of the effluent that's going back out by 2 or 3 degrees. So we're using some of that energy to heat the new building. Unfortunately, there's not enough energy to provide all the heat, because the time of year that we need the most heat is the time of year that the sewer plant has the least effluent. So we sized the system for the least amount of effluent there. So the backup is propane condensing boilers. All the heat recovery ventilation is called demand ventilation. So if a teacher leaves the classroom and there's nobody in the classroom, the occupancy sensor will know that, and the ventilation will be reduced automatically to a minimal setting. The new building is all LED. Just want to touch on a few things that we looked at and decided not to do. We looked at combined heat and power, actually to share between the elementary school and the high school, because they're right next to each other. That didn't make sense. We looked at wood chip boilers and pellet boilers. We looked at compressed natural gas, and that didn't make sense. So what's down the road? Right now, there's a study going on at the high school looking at retrofitting heat recovery to the ventilation. I put through ice banks in here because, I think the other thing that's down the road that I didn't put on the slide is, I think commercially anyway, we're going to be looking at a lot of time of use billing from Central Maine Power, or whoever your electrical company is. And if we get there, then I think ice banks will make a lot of sense for any of the air conditioned spaces that we have. Cold climate air source heat pumps, rather than drilling a well in the ground, are starting to look much more promising. There's some new refrigerants. There are also some technology that uses CO2 that is just now coming over from using CO2 as the refrigerant. I'm sorry, just coming over from Europe, that I think down the road is going to be very promising. Finally, just a year and a half ago, the 2 districts, and that's the elementary school and the middle school are one district, and the high school is actually its own district. We signed a power purchase agreement to purchase basically the remaining amount of our electricity that we weren't generating already with solar generated electricity, and that's about 2 million kilowatt hours, and that will be from a farm out in Livermore Falls. And that is the end of my slideshow.
Thank you very much, Keith. You've certainly showed us that these sort of projects are not one and done. There is constant need for monitoring and evaluation, and it sounds like you folks have been doing that. All right, so the next person we're going to hear from tonight is Beatty Parker. She is known in our town as the Tree Lady. She's a tree ambassador. So Beatty, you can unmute yourself, and it is your turn to do your talk.
Did that work?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, geez, this seems like it might be too long, but we'll see. I'm B. Parker, as you introduced me, and I'm probably going to have to read this because I can't remember everything. So I'll just go for it, and hopefully you will bear with me. I live in a shady spot in Washington Street, just 3 blocks up from Route 1 Elm Street. So I'm right in town and downtown Camden. I walk the streets in the warmer summer and fall weather, and I still bicycle sometimes. And when I do, I feel the temperature on my skin as I pass down the street and cut through the parking lots. I also love shaded streets and the homes and watching the trees throughout the seasons. For years, I worked with the Camden Garden Club Tree Committee to replant the streets with shade trees after the catastrophic loss of the town's American elms in early 70s. The garden club in town fought the elm disease, which was happening all over the country, with expensive pesticide injections. But in 1974, the elms, which had been planted in the 1800s, had to be cut down. And the town and garden club tree program collaboration began in 1976, continuing faithfully to this day. And I'd like Julia to show this little tiny slideshow of the postcards that Ken Gross picked out of the archives. A couple of them, the beautiful elms, and our streets aren't paved, of course, so everything's a lot greener and cooler. Keep going there. And this shows before they got going. I'm not sure what the date of this is, but you can kind of see what it's like without trees and with very small trees that haven't really reached over. You already have the electric lines there. And we've been coping with the electric lines pretty well, but this is what we want to avoid. We want to get ahead of this. And there's Mount Batty in the background. So go on. This shows that we actually had some really big trees downtown. And I can't believe that we can do that again. I don't think anybody would let us, but it's pretty wonderful. Okay, keep going. And another one, pretty much as we are. The cars are different, and it looks like rail lines there. I'm not really sure. Keep going. And here's the snow view. Again, seeing them downtown. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to fight that battle, but they're pretty wonderful. So I think that's it. Well, tonight I'm speaking for the town shade trees because we're here addressing our use of energy as a municipality, trying to cut back this use. And it was wonderful what we just heard that the town and the schools are doing. It's just unbelievable. And the trees can't do what they're doing, but they can help. Because climate change is advancing, our summers are warmer and longer, our growing seasons are already noticeably longer, and related weather extremes, droughts, downpours, and flooding and runoff, and extreme temperature shifts are already noticeable. At least I hope you notice it. In response to this change, we will, in the warm weather, be turning to the use of air conditioners and heat pumps to counter any summer discomfort. We're already doing this. this automatic and universal solution to feeling hot. Sorry, I'm getting lost here. Then consumes more energy, much of it still fossil fuel generated, and creates hotter outdoor public environment. And I have a footnote on that, which we may not get to. My proposal and hope is that we could be planting more shade trees faster now, because shade trees will take a while to get big enough to do their job, and because they do better when they're bigger. And they will need to be well cared for, at least initially, with the current summer droughts, and we are having droughts in New England. It's all relative. It's not as bad as in the Southwest. This is a heavy proposition, essential for bigger towns. In big cities, they call the effect an urban heat island, where the unshaded asphalt and built-up surfaces absorb the sun's radiation, the light actually, transform it into heat, and store it to re-radiate it into the city at night and day, actually, raising the ambient temperature as much as 7 degrees Fahrenheit above the greener, more shaded, tree canopy covered surroundings of the city. In addition, people suffer from lack of protective shade on hot summer days, to the extent that cities further south are now starting to think about designating heat officers to mitigate the dangerous health effects in poverty-stricken treeless neighborhoods. Environmental justice is a term one hears now, and planting trees in hot neighborhoods is one of the remedies for climate injustice. That's kind of a side statement, because we live in a prosperous area on the coast of Maine and are lucky enough to have the marine temperature moderating effect of the bay and ocean. Nonetheless, we're heating up. At the same time, our older trees are being taken down, leaving barren, unshaded spaces along most of our streets. These spaces almost invariably look bleaker and not worthy of the high prices usually earned by Camden home sales. Poor neighborhoods are typically treeless, and added value of keeping the town's street tree canopy going can be as much as 20% in property values. And all my figures I consider completely wobbly, and would like help at some point to see that if I can get better ones. The environmental services of the street shade tree, in addition to moderating temperature, include absorbing rainwater and slowing runoff, purifying thereby groundwater and the runoff itself, absorbing automotive and space heating hydrocarbon pollutants and CO2 itself, thereby purifying the air that we breathe, dampening down traffic and street noise, making the streets more beautiful, making people measurably happier and mentally stable, and providing habitat for other life forms, some of which we love. And I have some old data here. Old dollars, a 29-inch trunk diameter oak tree on the west side of home is worth $60 a year in ecological services. I think that's way out of date, and I've got something a little later. And you know all this, I'm just saying it again. I want to share a little experiment you can do yourself. See if you get the same results that I have. On a warm summer day, measure the temperature in these different locations: over the grass, in the shade of a big tree, over grass without shade, over pavement, over pavement under shade, over asphalt pavement without shade. Try parking lot too. And worst of all, inside a closed windowed car parked in the sun. Try inside a house that's shaded by trees versus a house with no shade. The difference between the shaded grass and the closed up car in the sun was 45 degrees Fahrenheit for me. It's pretty striking. Or just walk down the street on a warm, sunny summer day and feel the sensuous difference on your skin and in your lungs as you pass from hot, sunny spots into the shade of big tree over the sidewalk. Suddenly, you're cool, The light breeze stirs under the tree, generated by the draft caused by its transpiration. All this is gone again, hot and still, when you emerge from the shade on the other side of this cool island. I've got to confess that I grew up in a hot country, so I'm pretty sensitized. But try it anyway. Try getting out of your car for errands around town and just take some of these temperatures. The garden club in town tree program has in the meantime dwindled to only being able to afford to plant 6 trees a year, whereas we used to be able to plant 20 trees or more yearly. While the big trees are being taken down at a rate of 30 a year, some of these 125 and 200-year-old giants were planted in past shade tree planting projects, where the trees were depended on for their natural beauty and comfortable summers. So we need, as a town, to broaden the shade tree program. As trees take a while to grow big to provide the shade needed. I just learned that the town is upping this year's tree budget to allow no net loss by replacing lost trees. Thank you, town. This is really heartening. But we need to generate a street by street town tree inventory so that we know where new shade trees are needed. We need street captains to help contact and solicit residents where trees are needed. This is a great way to get to know your neighbors. It's fun too, it's fun work if people are home. I hope they're home. And volunteers to help with the initial summer's watering in some cases. We need to get the cost of planting down, it's huge, and do some fundraising to relieve the town and garden club who are suffering from COVID distancing. There was no Camden Garden Club tour last year, garden tour, so no funds, and a COVID economic downturn for the town, so that must affect taxes too. We might need tree nurseries to help with the tree cost. A tiny one is just being started on Saturday, thanks to the efforts of Keith Blizzard of Chestnut Street, who's a big tree guy. I need more tree people. Here's some of the examples of what we used to do. And I'm just gonna hold stuff up to the, I don't know if this is gonna work. I can't see myself very well. So this is a bumper sticker. I don't know how many people got it, but shade your asphalt. This is a, let's see if you can show, this is something we handed out when we were soliciting, and it shows here what the temperature is like in what the trees do with the sun in the winter and with the sun in the summer. In other words, the shade in the summer. This is deciduous trees. This isn't working very well. So, and this is one of our posters that we put up. I'm going to quit this. It's too low tech, but I wanted to try it. So get back to where I was, if I can find it. Okay, if there's time. I'm supposed to be talking about trees as climate mitigators. And like all plants, they do take up CO2 and also store it until they die and decay. So they're a good counterbalance to our CO2 emissions that are heating the planet, but we're so profligate in emitting something like 8 tons a year per person. I hope it's not true with our industrial human activities, whereas they say 2 tons a year each without counting the industry. I don't know if that's as much, but we are big energy consumers. A town tree canopy, and the older the tree, the more it stores, up to 1 ton in 40 years, can hardly make a dent in the imbalance. So it's the other services we're really after. As CO2 emitting mammals, we each produce about 800 pounds of CO2 a year to stay alive, whereas the typical hardwood tree can absorb only as much as 48 pounds of carbon dioxide a year, only 1/20th of our baseline metabolism CO2, not even counting cooking or heating. Even worse, with our industrial lifestyle, we almost 8 billion of us, we actually are emitting more than 43 billion tons a year. And I think that was several years ago, it's still going up. And of course, different cultures emit vastly different amounts per person. And trees can't keep up with this, but they help.
Edie, we have about 2 more minutes.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to say what an offset selling carbon company says. It says trees properly, they're selling carbon offsets with tree growth. Trees properly placed around buildings can reduce air conditioning needs by 30% and can save 20 to 50% in energy use for heating, which I had no idea, because it's sheltering the house. Net cooling effect of a young, healthy tree is equivalent to 10 room-size air conditioners operating 20 hours a day. That I find hard to believe. Trees reduce annual heating and cooling costs for typical residents by 8 to 12% and increase property values by 10 to 15%. But at the very least, we could choose to line our trees with shade trees, maintain and replace them and enjoy them while also cooling our streets and homes in the coming year, and save some energy in the balance. I probably don't have any time left for this. I had a list of why people say they don't want shade trees, which is kind of funny. And a footnote about Biden administration is going to gradually replace what's used in heat pumps and air conditioners now, which is called hydrofluorocarbons, because turns out they're greenhouse gases. And I hope they find something that's not a greenhouse gas or an ozone destroyer to replace them. And, oh yeah, a short sermon, which is about, instead of adding more technology, we need to think more about the biology of the whole thing and try to keep things as simple as possible. And I know that we got to do what we're doing, and the town cutting back is just what we need to do. But I think we need to cut back a lot more and reduce, and not just add new tech solutions, which we have to do. But the cutting back is the real key to getting to where we want to go.
Thank you so much, Beatty. That was very inspiring. And I hope that this, program we're doing here tonight helps to get the word out about your cause.
Yeah,
And
I need people to step and say, I want to volunteer and help with this enlarging the tree planting. And it's wonderful work.
Beatty, how can people get a hold of you if they are interested in?
Well,
helping
my
out?
phone number, which is the lowest tech thing I have, is 236-8732. And my email is Beatty Parker, my name, at gwi.net. So if that's about as good as I can do. I live at 68 Washington Street. Walk up and knock on the door, leave a note.
And she hangs out at the library a lot too. So if you can't find her on the streets or in her yard, she's probably at the library. Okay, yeah. Beatty, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here tonight. Okay, our last speaker we're going to hear from is Davis Saltonstall. He is with the City of Rockland and he is their sustainability coordinator. Thank you, Davis. It is your turn.
Thank you. Thank you, Audra. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Beatty. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, talking about energy in the Mid-Coast. I think, as you noted, Nancy, we're all trying to tackle these issues, and sharing some of those stories that we're going through, I think, is helpful. I have a short slideshow that goes through some of Rockland's strategy in terms of addressing the climate crisis and also our energy usage. I'll switch over to that now. Give me 1 second. Can everybody see this okay?
Yes, it looks good.
Great. So a preface to our conversation about energy. The City of Rockland has been working on energy and fuels efficiency for much longer than I have been with the City of Rockland. And as Audra noted, it's a multi-department effort. It's not just me. I've been an addition to the city to help facilitate some of these projects that are about efficiency, but also about tackling some of the larger issues that the city faces. Before I was hired, the City of Rockland City Council passed a resolution in addressing climate change and its Rockland's vulnerability to it, that set some pretty aggressive goals. So the framework now, we're working towards making the city as efficient as possible, but recognizing directly that some of that work is in response to the climate crisis. So by 2045, City Council resolved that the entire community of Rockland would be carbon neutral, and that by 2025, the city of Rockland will obtain 100% of its municipal electricity from renewable sources. From what I'm hearing from Audra and Keith, it sounds like everybody is trying to hit that same sort of 100% electricity from renewable sources goal, because it makes a lot of sense for the municipality, it saves money, and reduces CO2 emissions. Some of the other strategies, though, that are really essential to this resolution were dedicating staff, reducing energy consumption across the board, developing local renewables, implementing policy for greenhouse gas reductions across the community, incentivizing or supporting energy efficient transportation, working on community outreach and education, reducing reliance on fossil fuel heat, working with heat pumps and electrification, and regional coalition building, similar to the effort that Audra mentioned with our streetlight LED conversions, to help facilitate that effort through the whole as we go. In addition to that streetlight effort, the city has responded to that resolution, hiring a sustainability coordinator, me, creating a baseline of city government operations to measure progress year in, year out, similar to what Keith had showed us in terms of fuels and electricity spend. Signing a renewable power purchase agreement. That's similar, again, to what Audra and Keith were saying, the solar power purchase agreement that enables the city to save money and acquire green energy. Installing EV chargers in downtown. The city actually has written a couple of grants and is going after a couple more grants to install EV chargers at the Custom House parking lot, which is right by the Rockland Post Office. The city's also planning for sea level rise and storm surge, or hoping to work that into all of its municipal operations, and going through a very robust stormwater planning effort at the moment in order to meet new DEP or existing DEP guidelines, and plan for some of that increased hydrological pressure as a result of climate change. There are some additional efforts that the city has undergone. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna get that alarm that's in the other room. So the other efforts that aren't quite on this page, but have been going on in the background for a while, between different departments. All of our department heads are trying to make their buildings more efficient. I sometimes help with some of their projects that they're currently working on, or that they have already done. Again, this is echoing a lot of what Camden has already done too. Their pumps for aerating sewage that are much more efficient in wastewater treatment plants. Rockland did that several years ago, and it drastically reduced the energy demand for the wastewater treatment plant. With every upgrade the city does, it's always looking to be more efficient so that it can make the best use of taxpayer dollars. That said, the city is really trying to lead by example to show community members and businesses what's possible in moving forward with this transition. At least this year, with our power purchase agreement, we'll be 100% renewable in terms of our electricity, meeting that goal of 2025 a couple years early. And we'll have reduced our fuel and electricity emissions by 71%, which is a great start. There's more to do in terms of emissions operationally. The city runs a landfill, and there are some other land use emissions that the city can take into account. But for fuels and energy, this is a great place for us to begin. And as we take that city example, it's important for us to think about how these projects that we're working on right now might then be understood within the community and how we can expand some of that impact. Across the entire city of Rockland, we use about 100 million kilowatt hours, or 100 million kilowatt hours annually. The effort to get everybody onto renewable energy through contracts with solar, or by working towards getting as much renewable energy out there so that we can meet the renewable portfolio standard for the state. There are a couple different strategies to do that, but we're excited that those options generate savings as much as they do emissions reductions. Heating fuels are another really big cost and source of emissions for the city of Rockland. A lot of those come from oil furnaces in our community. And the city is really excited about many of the incentives that are offered by Efficiency Maine for homeowners to transition to more efficient options and less fossil fuel intensive options like heat pumps. The savings there are pretty compelling to making switches, even for just parts of your home. In transportation, as I mentioned, EV chargers and the electric vehicle transition is really important to how the city thinks about its emissions, when community-wide, roughly 50% of them are coming from transportation. So the electric vehicle charging station we've installed at the post office, whether the city is the one who's responsible for installing those chargers in the future, or there are public-private partnership opportunities in the future, that's something that is on the city's radar for how it builds and supports that transition moving forward. And then in terms of scope 3 emissions, this is where it gets back to more of what Bea was saying about how the emissions globally are so outsized from what we currently consume in terms of fuels and energy, because our purchasing has an impact by supporting the production practices of different products. And thinking about where and how you source your different products is potentially of interest, although not immediately on the city's docket of responsibilities. Just that it's aware of the opportunity to reduce emissions on a global scale through intentional purchasing, and figuring out how best to do that, or what those best practices are, is an effort for conversation that's probably not going to come from the city alone, but maybe more of a state or national effort. This is all I have for you guys in terms of slides. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all about our general energy goals, and hope that as a community here on Western Penobscot Bay, we can all find ways to move forward, reduce our energy footprints, and address the climate crisis, which we all are currently doing, which is so evident from these presentations. So without further ado, I'll stop this share and I'll return it back to.
Thank you so much, Davis. I think it is really helpful to see where different towns in our mid-coast area are on all of these topics. and the different approaches that they're taking to address them. Speaking of, I want to turn it back to Audra for a few minutes to, because Camden does not currently have a sustainability coordinator. And so we thought it would be a good opportunity for Audra to say a little piece about how, her thoughts on that. So Audra, it's your turn to jump on back in.
Sure. Sorry. So, yeah, I guess like we've really taken the approach that it's more of a organizational, cultural perspective with the town of Camden. So I see it as something that's really important for all of my departments and department heads to be responsible for. So that's, you know, that's kind of one of the reasons we haven't gone that route in Camden. I definitely see the benefit in other communities, but I'm really fortunate to have, you know, a lot of department heads with environmental sciences backgrounds, and they have, you know, a strong interest and belief in sustainability and, you know, energy efficiency and reducing or trying to address the impacts of climate change. So, you know, I think when you have that strong culture throughout your entire organization, you know, it becomes everybody's responsibility. And I have a lot of great project managers that, you know, they're capable of progressing these projects and moving them forward. And I'm fortunate to have a very supportive select board that champions these initiatives and, you know, takes projects that have been generated from groups such as the Energy Committee or projects that have been generated by department heads and helps us to move them forward. And I think a good example of that is the Siemens performance contract. That was a project that, you know, it required a special town meeting in order to, you know, secure the necessary funding to do that project. And we had to, you know, do it in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of the winter. And, you know, we had great support from the community to, you know, hold that special town meeting to get the funding approval that we needed. And that was really exciting because I think that, you know, if you look at just our previous open town meeting in 2019, we had 76 people there, whereas at a January special town meeting, just for the purpose of, you know, approving a performance contract and the funding for it and the financing for it. There are about 130 people there that showed up to ask questions about the project and vote, and the support was overwhelming. So I feel really fortunate that there's a strong support for this sort of work within the town of Camden. And, you know, we've got a lot of different, you know, people across our community who are great champions and great executors of this. So I think that that's made it really easy for us to progress a lot of this work with the sort of structure we have in place throughout our organization.
Thank you. Before we move on to some of the other questions, I had one that was directly related to this that was emailed to me prior to the talk. And while you did address a lot of her question, Sarah wants to know, given the many pressing issues occupying town officials and the select board at this time, do you see any advantage of now or in the future having someone, a dedicated town employee whose job is to develop, advocate, and seek funding for the policies to reduce the greenhouse gases and everything else that we've talked about tonight? I think, so it sounds like her concern is that it's such a big job that she's concerned that maybe spreading the load. Is there, if you could just expand upon that a little bit more.
Well, I would say that there's not only bandwidth within town staff, but there's bandwidth amongst the select board, voters. There are only so many things that we can work on at any one given time. So I think that, you know, even if we had, you know, dedicated people, I think that the expectation grows in proportion to the resources that you have available. And the bandwidth amongst, you know, townspeople who have to, it's different in Camden than in Rockland. In Rockland, the legislative body is the city council. They can sort of move things forward a lot more quickly than we can in Camden, where our legislative body is townspeople. You know, a big part of our jobs are trying to inform, educate, and then, you know, get townspeople involved in every single thing we do that requires approval from our legislative body. And there are lots of things that, you know, the town is responsible for. And there are only so many things in any given year that, you know, you can expect voters to be completely educated in, engaged in, and show up able to support, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So I do think that, you know, there's a limit to what we're able to do that is just inherent in our structure, our form of government, that's different than a place like Rockland or Belfast or a city council. So I think that that's always going to be the challenge for Camden. And that just doesn't apply to energy and sustainability issues. It applies to any initiative that we want to undertake. Like there's just only so much that we can do that voters feel comfortable with, because we ask a lot from them in the way that we've set up our democracy and what they need to pay attention to in order to be good, engaged citizens.
Thank you. I think that addresses her question. Exactly. Thank you very much. Okay, and so I have a question for Keith that came in. Again, you also answered a lot of what Jim was asking about, but he's talking about the turbine, the wind turbine at the high school. And he said that part of the original agreement was that there would be power statistics that would be posted on the internet, and he has not seen any of those statistics ever posted. So if you could speak to that, that's the first part of his question. And then the second part has to do with the fact that Northern Power, who built the turbine, has had serious financial difficulties. How is the maintenance of that turbine been dealt with, since the company has not been very capable?
So I'm going to answer the second part of that question first. The maintenance is taken care of by a third party, and always has been. So there are PM companies out there that you contract with to do the annual maintenance on your turbine, and they do maintenance on Northern turbines and GE turbines and all kinds of turbines. I'm aware that the company was sold. They are still in business. Our turbine at the high school is turbine number 196, and I believe they're up in the 400 or 500s at this point. As far as the stats, I believe at some point early on we did put out, and I can ask Margot to check on this. There was a link at one point on the high school website that would take you to the Northern Power website that had all our turbine statistics on it. So I have no problem making sure that happens.
Thank you. Yes, and all the data you showed us was very interesting. Okay, so Nancy asks, what's the current status of the Owl's Head solar array? Is it on track, and when will it be operational? So this might be a question for Audra. Or possibly for Davis.
Sorry. So I do know that they've signed a contract with Revision, who will be the developer out there. I think that they're still going through the process of, interconnection agreement with CMP. So I believe from what I heard, it was supposed to be 2022, but I'm not certain about exactly when.
Okay, we'll stay tuned for more updates on that. Thank you very much. Actually, I had a question for Beatty. So as you were speaking about planting trees, I was wondering if you had any suggestions for specifically types of trees that should be planted that are, speedy growers and drought tolerant, and what should people in our community, if they're going to take matters into their own hands, what should they be planting, Beatty?
Some of us are working on their tree lists all over from different cities, and they're wonderful programs that map the cities and tell you about the trees in Washington, D.C. and some other places. But we need to decide on a list, and that list has to change over time, because of the heating that's going on, different trees are going to become more, well, better to recommend as time changes. And so I've been looking at forest lists because there is forest work going on. Apparently the sugar maples are not going to do very well. The red maples, who are more drought resistant, they can stand both water and drought, are probably going to be doing better. We're worried about ash because of the emerald green ash borer, so nobody's recommending that at the moment. People hate Norway maples because the seedlings, and the state will say, don't plant them, but they're really strong. And another one that those of us who are rebellious like is black locust. And that is hated too, but it's really not, it's easy to control as an invasive. So it's not a problem. We want to plant more elms, and they're more resistant elms, and we should be doing that. And the red oak is really apparently going to do okay. We don't know what's coming in terms of the weather completely. And this drought thing really worries me, which is why I want a lot of watering volunteers and systems to make sure that whatever trees we increase get a good start. But one of the problems is the small trees that we need underneath the wires. And I don't feel that we have a good grasp on that. A lot of the small trees don't live as long as you'd hope, and they're not as sturdy. It's a problem. So I can't, in this tiny little nursery that we're just starting on Saturday, we've got the tail end of, sorry, this is so long. We've got the tail end of the Knox County Soil and Water Order. And so we're getting some mountain ash, which is a good small tree, but gets bugs, and red maples, which are recommended. So that's all we got to start with, and we got to work on this list and your question.
Thank you. Sounds like a good start, and we'll keep our eyes peeled for more resources.
Well, we need to look at southern cities and see what trees are doing well a little further south.
Yeah, that makes sense with the changes in temperature that we're anticipating. So we're going to wrap up, and I encourage that if anyone has additional questions for the presenters who are here tonight, please do reach out to them directly and ask, or, you know, in Beatty's case, get involved and let her know that you're willing to help out. I want to turn the program over to Nancy again, Nancy Harmon Jenkins, who's again here from Camden's Energy Committee, to speak a little bit more about the series. Nancy, are you available? Oh, she might have. Oh.
Unmute. Okay, I'm available.
All right, there you are.
And I noticed that Anita Ambrosia Scott had her hand up. She had a question she wanted to ask. So I would turn to Anita very briefly. Anita, unmute yourself. Anita?
Thank you. Yes, got it. Sorry, it took a minute. Beatty mentioned a red oak, and we've got another bug problem of the brown-tailed moth. We don't know how long that's going to be in our region, but it makes living under the oak trees that they invade a very uncomfortable prospect. So that's definitely a problem. It seems like it might be best to plant a variety of species so that whatever bug comes along next, it's not going to kill all the trees in the whole town. So I think looking at a variety would be really important. Of course, some grow a lot faster than others. Silver maple seems to grow very fast. Sugar maple is a very slow grower. So I don't know. I don't know how to make that decision. You know, would you and I wanted to know, since talking to Beatty, about what her thoughts are regarding other landscaping plants, bushes, small trees, and even grass, what she considers grass, and certainly in terms of carbon dioxide uptake.
Beatty, did you want to take a moment to answer that?
Well, let's see, I'm unmuted. Is this working?
Yeah, we can hear
Um,
you.
Okay. Planting a variety is extremely important, as we learned after the death of the elms. So that's just part of it. The brown-tailed moth, I hate the idea of people cutting down elms because of that, although that's what Fresh Off the Farm had to do. My feeling is that it goes on for a few years and most of them survive, and then they're not here for a while. They are endemic, the brown-tailed moth, but I don't want to see us destroying elms, not planting red oaks because of that, maybe for a while, but we can't fight all the insects at the same time, and variety is the real key. So, and I think we should all be working on these lists, what we think and the pluses and minuses. So I want to hear about that, to be working on that.
Thank you so much, Beatty. Was there anything else, Nancy, at the end of this talk before we sign off and say goodnight to everyone?
Well, I just want to thank everybody because I think it's been really, really interesting. I'm glad so many people came out. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do on June 3rd, our final presentation where we'll look at the state as a whole. And it's very interesting because we've got Hannah Pingree, who's the chair of the Maine Climate Council coming, and Vicki Dudera, who's not only our local representative, but also on the Environmental and Natural Resources Committee, and Michael Stoddard, who's the executive director of Efficiency Maine, which has done so much to encourage alternative energy systems here. And I'm hoping also Kathleen Mile, if she's listening, she doesn't know this yet, but I'm hoping to ask her. She runs the clean energy campaign for Maine conservation voters. So mark your calendars for that date, June 3rd, and get in touch with Julia at the library for a Zoom link and join us all on that evening. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Julia, especially.
Yes, thank you everyone for showing up tonight. We know that it was a beautiful night and you had lots of other choices or places you could be, but you chose to spend it with us with this important conversation. So we hope you'll join us again in June. For myself at the library, I wish everyone a lovely evening and thank you so much for taking the time, all of our presenters, to be here tonight with us. Good night.
Thank you.